Let's get more from SERI Research and Advocacy Officer Edward Molopi. We are still in conversation with him about the blame game. And you were saying that Kenny Kunene is not exactly right by saying that you were asking of him something different to what he thought you were asking him. Just explain that to us. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, so I mean, I think what we were saying at that point was that if he wants to undertake a process of evicting people, that there is a process that needs to be followed in law. You can't just simply go in and force people out on the street. And that is what we have basically been saying all these years, that if as a state, as a caring state, you say that there is a building that should be condemned and that it is a safety hazard, we encourage you to act quickly on that building. But in doing so, make sure that people have an alternative to go. I think what has been mostly used is that people come and they want to say, we are going to demolish this building without providing an alternative for people. And so people are then left out on the street, which is, unlawful and unconstitutional. But if there are efforts that say, this building is unsafe, we are going to move you to the next building or a building a kilometer away or whatever the situation is, no one is going to oppose such an intervention. But there have been no such intervention that has been put in the inner city to this date.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was going, because one thing for sure, the different politicians from different political parties are playing the blame game, yes, but where they all agree, besides Kenny Kunene, is that SERI is to blame. It was not just Kenny Kunene who actually mentioned you, it's also the MMC of Public Safety, Dr. Ntaku, who actually said SERI earlier today. He says that you have slowed down government's process of taking people out of hazardous buildings and giving them better buildings by keeping them in court.
Yeah, I mean, we've never, in fact, even on this particular building, we have no involvement. We've never litigated. Okay. And this is a city-owned building, right? So the city should have been aware of the conditions in this particular building. We have no involvement. We've never done any interaction with them in relation to this particular building. And so if they were serious about those efforts, they could have moved people earlier away from this building, or at least pointed to instances where we have blocked them in relation to this particular building, and they will not be able to do so.
Tell me something, as SERI, are you not concerned about the crisis of hijacked buildings that are unsafe in the city of Johannesburg? The law, taken aside, of course, it does stipulate in the law that if you're going to evict somebody, you have to give them alternative accommodation. But that aside, are you not concerned, perhaps, as SERI and as an organization, about the crisis? It is a crisis that we're facing in the city of Johannesburg, in the city centre.
Yes, no, we are certainly concerned about that. And this is not a concern that we are having only today, now that we have this crisis. It's a concern that we've had for a very long time. And we've made efforts to interact with the city in relation to, I think, a broader housing program in the inner city that would ensure that people are living in safe and equitable housing, and we've tried in various efforts and methods to try and engage with the city to say, how do we put together a housing program that will accommodate the vast majority of the people that are currently in the inner city, who are living in occupied buildings that are unsafe, that are without basic services, and quite frankly, unsafe for human health. Today we are speaking about a fire, and
73 people dead.
We might be, and very soon we might actually be speaking about a building that actually collapsed on people. And that's the sort of concerns that we are having. And we have no interest in people living in dilapidated buildings that are devoid of basic services and strip away their dignity. What we are simply saying is that as we find an alternative for them, let's ensure that they don't end up on the street.
And, obviously to South Africans, it just looks like somebody is benefiting in a corrupt way for the buildings or for the crisis in Johannesburg to worsen, both from provincial and you say municipal, interactions that you've had with municipal leaders as well. For instance, we've changed mayors so many times in Johannesburg, but this problem has always persisted. So South Africans, obviously, and people who live in it are just wondering if, it's ever going to be fixed. Is there ever going to be a solution? And who is it benefiting for the crisis to continue unabated?
Yeah, I think as you currently put it, that the current state of affairs is that there are people who are, of course, benefiting financially from the current situation in the inner city. But that can all be stopped if we have a government that says, here is a program for the inner city, and they implement and work on that program. I think what we have been worried about and complaining about is that sometimes there are programs that are, introduced, but they're never followed through. And so people never get the benefit of those programs. And of course, I think it's just the lack of political will to ensure that people have the kind of housing that they need. Because, I think if you look at the vast majority of the people who are currently housed in these occupations are very low-income households, people who don't have a means. And so there is often a lack of political will to expedite and relieve their suffering.
Well, Edward, thank you very much for your time. I think it's been a ticking time bomb for a while now, and it's so unfortunate that it's gone unsorted to a point where we're now talking about 73 people who have died, and emergency services telling our team on the ground that by the end of today, it might just be more.